She always left one extra lunch until she finally met who it was for. She never meant for anyone to notice. It was just something she did quietly, without asking questions or expecting anything in return. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe if you love meaningful stories, and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I really enjoy seeing where these stories travel. Every morning before work, she packed 2 lunches. One went into her purse. The other, a plain brown paper bag, always looked the same. No name, no note, just a sandwich, a piece of fruit, a granola bar, and a bottle of water. Sometimes she added a pack of crackers, sometimes a small treat, but it was always enough to get someone through the day. She left it on the same park bench outside her office building, not far from where the buses stopped, not close enough to draw attention. She didn't linger. She'd place the bag gently in the center of the bench, glance around once, and then walk inside. That was it. Every day, rain or shine. At first, she wasn't sure if anyone would take it. For the first few days, the bag sat untouched. She'd check the bench from her office window on the 5th floor. Mid-morning, lunchtime, late afternoon. Still there. But then one morning it was gone. No sign of who took it. No mess. Just the bench. Empty again. She kept bringing the lunch anyway. She never saw anyone waiting, never caught anyone in the act. Whoever it was, they were careful. And that was fine with her. She wasn't doing it to be thanked. She was doing it because it felt right. Some people walked past the bench every day and never noticed. Others sat there for a few minutes and never questioned the paper bag beside them. No one ever touched it except the one it was meant for. She wondered who it was. Man or woman, young or old. Maybe someone who had lost their job. Maybe a student. Maybe someone sleeping on the street nearby. She didn't need to know. She just hoped it helped. There was something steady about the routine. Pack the lunch, leave the bag, go to work. She didn't miss a day. Even when she was running late, even when she didn't feel like going in. It became something she looked forward to. A quiet moment that reminded her the day wasn't just about emails and meetings and checking boxes. It was about showing up, even in small ways. She never told anyone, not her coworkers, not her sister, not her closest friend. It wasn't something she needed to explain. It just mattered to her. Sometimes, when the day felt heavy or unimportant, she'd look out the window and see that the bag was gone. And it reminded her that someone out there had eaten that sandwich, had something cold to drink, had something to hold on to for a few hours. That mattered. It made the rest of the day feel a little less empty. She never changed the routine, never added a note, never waited to watch. It was enough to know the lunch wasn't going to waste. But there were moments when she caught herself wondering what the person thought. Did they trust it right away? Did they look inside cautiously? Did they wait to see if it was a trick? She hoped not. She hoped they understood that it was safe, that it was real, that someone out there simply cared enough to make sure they had something to eat. And maybe, even if just for a few minutes, they didn't feel forgotten. That was the whole point. She didn't know who it was for. Not yet. But every morning, without fail, she packed that extra lunch and placed it on the bench, just in case. She never missed a morning, not even once. The alarm would go off at 6:10. She'd get dressed, make coffee, and pull out 2 containers from the cupboard. One for her, one extra. It wasn't complicated. Nothing fancy, just enough food to get someone through the day. She packed it the same way every time, sandwich first, then the snack, then the water bottle. She always made sure it was balanced. Protein, something sweet, something to drink. She never packed leftovers. Never gave something she wouldn't eat herself. It had to be fresh. It had to feel like care. By 7:15, she was out the door. Her building was just 3 blocks from the office. She walked the same route each day, through the same crosswalks, past the same storefronts that opened just after sunrise. A flower shop, a bakery, a newsstand that never seemed to sell much of anything. She always arrived at the park bench by 7:30. That's when she left the lunch. It was quiet at that time. The bus stop nearby would have a few people, mostly early shift workers, security guards, janitorial crews, sometimes a student with a backpack and earbuds in. But no one ever paid her much attention. She'd walk up, place the brown paper bag right in the center of the bench, and keep walking. That was it. No waiting, no second look. She didn't linger because she didn't want it to become about her. It wasn't about being seen doing something kind. It was about making sure someone else had something they needed. The first time she did it, it was on impulse. She had made too much food and didn't want to throw it away. She had passed the bench that morning and thought maybe someone could use it. She hadn't planned to do it again. But when the lunch disappeared that first time, something stuck with her. So she did it again and again. And then it became part of the morning. She never told herself it was heroic. It wasn't. It was just a lunch. But it was also more than that. Because someone was taking it. Someone was out there, showing up after she walked away, trusting that what she left behind was safe, that it was theirs. And in a world where most things felt rushed or overlooked or transactional, that quiet exchange started to matter. She didn't wonder much in the beginning, but after a few weeks she started noticing little things. The bag was always gone by 10 o'clock. Sometimes she'd pass the bench at lunch and there'd be nothing left, not even the water bottle. Other times, she'd find the bag folded neatly and tucked under the bench, like whoever took it wanted her to know they were careful with it. She never saw a face, never caught anyone in the act, but she liked the mystery of it, liked that the kindness lived in the space between them. There were days she thought about leaving a note, just a few words, maybe asking their name, maybe letting them know she hoped they were okay. But she didn't, because she didn't want them to feel pressure to respond. She didn't want to break whatever quiet trust they had built. So she just kept doing the same thing. Lunch packed, bag folded, placed on the bench. Every day, no matter what the weather looked like, no matter what kind of mood she was in, no matter if the day ahead felt overwhelming or ordinary, the lunch was always there, and somehow that helped her too. It started with a wrapper. She had packed a sandwich like she always did. Turkey, cheese, a little mustard, nothing complicated. The brown paper bag went on the bench at 7:30, just like every morning. By 10 o'clock, it was gone. But when she passed by on her lunch break, she noticed something sitting under the bench, just barely peeking out. She bent down and picked it up. It was the sandwich wrapper, folded neatly, tucked where the wind wouldn't catch it. She looked around. No one paid attention. A few people sitting on nearby benches, a couple walking their dog. Nothing out of the ordinary. She stood there for a moment, holding the wrapper in her hand. It was the first real sign that someone out there was saying thank you. Not with words, not with a note, just by being careful, by not leaving a mess, by showing her they noticed the care she was putting into it. She didn't expect it, but it made her pause. The next day, it happened again. Different wrapper, different sandwich, same fold, same spot under the bench. It became a kind of unspoken exchange. She left the lunch. They left nothing behind, except that quiet detail. It told her something she hadn't been sure of until then. Whoever was taking the lunch wasn't careless. They were thoughtful. They noticed. She started packing a little extra in the bag after that. A bigger piece of fruit, an extra granola bar, something small, but more than before. And then one day, she found something else. A napkin, folded into a square, sitting right where the bag had been. She picked it up and opened it slowly. There, in small handwriting, was one word. Thanks. That was it. No name, no story. Just that. She stood at the bench longer than usual that morning. She didn't know how to explain how it felt. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't emotional. But it was real. Someone out there knew what she was doing, and they were grateful. She held on to the napkin, didn't throw it away, folded it back up and put it in her coat pocket, carried it with her for the rest of the day. It stayed there, even when she went home. That night, as she unpacked her things, she unfolded the napkin again, looked at the small, simple word. The letters pressed hard into the paper, like whoever wrote it had taken their time. She thought about them more after that. Who they were, where they went after they ate, what kind of life they were trying to hold together. She didn't imagine anything dramatic, no tragic backstory, no big rescue, just someone trying to get through the day. And somehow, her small gesture had helped. It made her more careful with what she packed. No soggy sandwiches, no bruised fruit. She wanted them to have something decent, something that showed someone cared. She didn't need to meet them. But now, she couldn't help but wonder. She found herself checking the bench more often, not to catch them, just to see if they were still there, still showing up, still trusting the bag would be there. And it always was, and it was always gone. And more than ever, she hoped they were okay. She remembered the winter it happened to her. Years ago now, but still clear. She had just moved to the city. New job, barely paying enough. Rent ate up most of her check, and what was left had to stretch. Some weeks it didn't. It was cold that week. Snow on the sidewalks. She'd been skipping meals to cover a medical bill. Thought no one noticed. Kept her head down. Did her work. Told herself it would pass. One afternoon she went to the break room and found a brown paper bag sitting on the table. Her name wasn't on it. No note, no explanation. Inside was a sandwich, a small container of soup, a cookie, and an apple. Nothing big, but everything she needed that day. She asked around. No one claimed it. No one even seemed to know it was there. It happened again 2 days later. Same kind of lunch, same kind of quiet. She never found out who it was, never asked too hard. But it got her through that week, that month. And even after things got better, she never forgot. Someone had seen her, not in a way that embarrassed her, not in a way that made her feel exposed, just enough to let her know she wasn't invisible. Years later, when her life felt more stable, that memory stayed with her. The paper bag, the soup, the silence around it, that feeling of being quietly cared for. So when she saw someone sleeping under the bus shelter near her office building last fall, she thought about that winter again. She didn't stop, didn't talk to them, but the memory stayed with her all day. That evening, she made 2 lunches instead of 1. She packed them the same. Nothing fancy, nothing loud. And the next morning, she left the second one on the bench. She didn't think it would become a habit, but it did. Not because she wanted to be someone's savior, not because she thought she was fixing anything, just because she remembered what it felt like to need something and not know how to ask for it. That feeling didn't go away easily. And now, all these years later, with a steady job and a routine that gave her comfort, she figured the least she could do was pay it forward. It didn't feel like a grand gesture, but it felt real. She never talked about that winter. Not with friends, not with family, not even when conversations turned toward hard times or rough patches. Some things stay tucked away. But that lunch, those silent gifts, had stayed with her. Every time she folded a sandwich into wax paper, every time she packed an apple just right, every time she wrote the date on a water bottle cap, she thought of it. And now, with someone out there taking what she left each morning, the full circle of it all felt like something worth holding on to. She didn't know who they were, but she knew what it felt like to be them. And that was enough. So she kept packing the extra lunch. Not because she had to, because someone once did it for her. She was running late that morning. It wasn't anything major, just one of those days where everything felt off. Alarm didn't go off. Shower ran cold. She couldn't find her keys. By the time she got the lunches together, it was already past her usual time. She debated skipping the extra one, told herself it wouldn't matter. It was just one day. But she packed it anyway. Peanut butter and jelly, crackers, an orange. She didn't have time to make it perfect, just enough to fill the bag. When she reached the park, it was already after 8 o'clock. The streets were busier, more people heading into buildings. The usual quiet had been replaced by honking, chatter, and hurried footsteps. She placed the bag on the bench, like always, but it felt different this time. Rushed, off rhythm. She didn't linger, didn't check her surroundings, just dropped the bag and walked inside. From her office window, she could see the bench clearly. She checked it at 9 o'clock. Then again at 10:15. The bag was still there. By noon, it hadn't moved. She sat at her desk, trying to focus on her emails, but her eyes kept drifting back to the window. The bag hadn't been touched, not shifted, not opened. She felt something she hadn't expected. Guilt. It didn't make sense. She had still packed it, still brought it, but she hadn't been there at the usual time. And whoever it was, whoever had come to trust the rhythm, hadn't found it waiting. Maybe they thought it wasn't coming that day. Maybe they had already left. Maybe they had gone hungry. She didn't know. And that uncertainty hit harder than she expected. At 1 o'clock, she walked outside to get coffee. The bag was gone. No sign of who had taken it. No wrapper left behind. No folded napkin. Just an empty bench and a cold breeze. She stood there for a moment, her coffee forgotten. The lunch had been taken. That was something. But the delay, her being late, had broken the rhythm. And that mattered more than she thought it would. She hadn't realized how much she had come to rely on that moment each day, how much it grounded her, how much it reminded her that someone else was out there, depending on that small gesture to be there when they needed it. It wasn't just a lunch anymore. It was trust. And that morning, she hadn't held up her end of it. She walked back inside slower than usual, didn't say much to her coworkers, didn't check her email right away, just sat down and thought about how something so small could start to feel so big. She told herself she'd be early tomorrow, not just on time, early, because now she understood what she hadn't before. Consistency mattered. The rhythm mattered, not just to whoever was taking the lunch, but to her, too. She got there early the next day, earlier than she ever had before. The sky was still dim. The streetlights hadn't turned off yet. A few delivery trucks moved slowly along the curb, and the bakery on the corner was just pulling up its gate. She had packed the lunch with extra care: ham and cheese on fresh bread, a banana, trail mix, a bottle of water. She wrote the date on the cap like always. Nothing fancy, but enough. She stood at the edge of the park, lunch bag in hand, watching the bench from a distance. She had never done this before. For months, she had dropped the lunch and walked away without a glance. No curiosity, no questions, just quiet purpose. But after yesterday, after the missed moment, she felt something she hadn't before. She wanted to see, not for recognition, Not to make it personal, just to know they were still there. Just to know the connection hadn't broken. At 7:10, she crossed the street and placed the lunch in the center of the bench. The paper bag sagged slightly under the weight of the bottle. She adjusted it once, then stepped back and walked toward the edge of the park. She sat on a different bench, one tucked behind a tree, out of sight, but close enough to watch. And then she waited. The minutes passed slowly. The cold settled in through her coat. People walked by, a man with a briefcase, a woman with a stroller, a jogger with earbuds. No one looked at the lunch. She checked the time. 7:35. Still there. More people passed. A bus let out a small group near the corner. She watched each person, her eyes catching on every movement. But no one approached the bench. 7:50. Still untouched. She started to wonder if they'd come at all. Started to wonder if being late yesterday had changed something, if the quiet trust had been shaken, if they'd stopped believing the lunch would be there. By 8:10, she began to feel the weight of it. Not disappointment exactly, more like uncertainty. That strange feeling when you realize you might never know the full story, no matter how much you care. At 8:15, she stood up to leave. Work was calling. Her phone buzzed once, then again. She glanced at the screen, turned toward the sidewalk, and paused. When she looked back at the bench, the bag was gone. No sound, no footsteps, no person in sight. Just gone. She walked over slowly, checked under the bench. Nothing left behind this time. No wrapper, no napkin, no note. But the bag was gone. She stood there looking at the empty space and felt something settle in her chest. They were still out there, still coming, still watching for the moment the bag appeared. Maybe they had waited, just like she had. Maybe they'd seen her and stayed hidden. Maybe they hadn't trusted her being there. Or maybe they simply came when they always did. Quiet. Careful. She didn't need to know which it was. She just knew they were still there. And that meant everything. She crossed the street and walked back toward the office. Her steps were slower. Not rushed, not heavy, just steady. The rhythm was still alive. The connection hadn't broken. And tomorrow she'd be back. Same time, same place, same quiet gesture. Because now she knew. It still mattered. The note was tucked under the edge of the bench, folded in half. No envelope, just a piece of lined paper, creased and slightly damp from the morning dew. She didn't see it at first. She had left the lunch like always, walked into work, and checked from her office window around 9:30. The bag was gone. That should have been enough. But something pulled at her. At lunch, she walked outside, not to double-check, just to be near the bench. She wasn't sure why. And that's when she saw it. A small corner of paper sticking out from under the slat where she usually placed the bag. She bent down, pulled it free, and held it in her hand. The writing was small and neat, a little shaky, but legible. She opened it carefully. Hi. I don't know your name. I don't know if you know mine. That's okay. I just wanted to say thank you. Your lunch has been the only thing I can count on most days. I've been in between places trying to stay out of shelters. Not because I think I'm better, just because they're full or they feel too loud. The lunch helps more than you know. It's not just food. It's knowing someone out there sees me, even if you don't know who I am, even if we never talk. I never take more than I need. I only take it when I really have nothing. I hope that's okay. I always try to leave the wrapper behind to show I was careful. I didn't mean for you to find the napkin note, but I'm glad you did. I've started figuring things out. It's slow, but I'm working on it. Your lunch helped me through the hardest part. I just wanted you to know it made a difference. Thank you. There was no name, No date, no signature. She read it once, then again. She sat down slowly on the bench, the paper still open in her hands, and looked around. The street was busy, people coming and going. No one paid attention to her. No one looked twice. But someone had been here that morning. Quiet, careful, grateful. She folded the note and slid it into her coat pocket, not to keep as a memory, but to carry for a while. To remind herself what a small act could mean. The words weren't dramatic, weren't polished, but they were clear. Whoever they were, they had seen her, and they had felt seen. That was all she'd ever hoped for. To know the food wasn't just filling a stomach, to know it was reaching a person. A real person with a name and a story, even if she never learned either one. The bench felt different that day. Not just a place to leave something, a place where something had already happened, something that mattered. She stood up and walked back toward the building, the note safe in her pocket, her steps quieter than usual. Tomorrow she would pack another lunch, same as always. But now she'd pack it, knowing who it was for. It was just after 7 when she left the building with the lunch in hand. The sun hadn't fully come up yet. The streets were still quiet. A soft chill hung in the air. She crossed the park without rushing. There wasn't any reason to hurry that morning. She just wanted to be there early, like always. When she turned the corner toward the bench, she stopped. Someone was already sitting there. Thin, shoulders hunched forward. Hoodie pulled over their head. A duffel bag at their feet. They weren't eating. Just sitting. Arms crossed tight, eyes low. She recognized the bag. Same duffel she'd seen once weeks ago behind the transit shelter. She hadn't connected it then. Now she did. She slowed her steps. Didn't want to startle them. Didn't want to make it awkward. But she had the lunch, and she was already there. When she got closer, they looked up. Young. Maybe 16. 17 at most. Face still soft. Eyes tired. Not afraid. Just guarded. She stood in front of the bench, the lunch bag in her hands. Neither of them said anything right away. Then she gently held it out. "I usually just leave it here," she said, keeping her voice steady. "But I guess you beat me to it today." The kid looked at the bag, then back at her, hesitated, then took it with both hands, quiet. "Thanks," they said, barely above a whisper. She nodded once. "You're welcome." They sat there for a second longer, holding the bag but not opening it. She didn't push. "Mind if I sit for a minute?" she asked. They shrugged, which wasn't a yes, but it wasn't a no either. So she sat. The bench was cold. They didn't talk at first, just sat side by side, watching the park slowly wake up. She didn't ask questions, didn't press. After a few minutes, the kid pulled out the sandwich and took a bite, chewed slowly. Then, without looking at her, they spoke. "I wasn't sure it was okay. Taking it every day." She looked at them. "It was okay," she said. "I hoped someone would." They nodded, still not meeting her eyes. "I always tried to wait until no one was around." "I figured," she said. "You were good at it." That got a small smile, barely there, but it was something. They ate in silence for a while. Finally, they looked over. "I'm Jessie." She nodded. "I'm Claire." That was all. They sat for a little longer. Claire stood first, brushed the bench off with one hand. "I'll still bring it," she said, "if you ever need it. You don't have to take it, but it'll be there." Jessie looked up at her, sandwich still in hand. "Okay," they said. "Thank you." Claire nodded once more and started walking back to the building. When she turned around at the corner, Jessie was still there, sitting with the bag, eating in peace. For the first time, Claire didn't feel like she was guessing anymore. Now she knew who it was for, and that changed everything. The next morning, the routine felt different. Not in a bad way, not in a way that made her nervous. Just different. She packed the lunch like always. Careful, steady, no shortcuts. Turkey sandwich, apple, chips, and a small pack of cookies she thought Jessie might like. She didn't add a note. She didn't need to. By the time she reached the bench, the sun was up. Jessie was already there, sitting in the same spot, hood down this time, bag beside them, hands in their lap. They looked up when she arrived, gave a small nod. Claire nodded back. She placed the lunch on the bench like she always had, not in front of Jessie, just in the center, where it had always gone. Same spot, same motion. She sat down beside them again, this time without asking. It felt normal now. Jessie picked up the bag and opened it slowly. They didn't talk much. They didn't need to. A few minutes passed. Jessie ate half the sandwich, then offered her the rest. She shook her head. "It's yours." They didn't insist, just kept eating. A bus hissed to a stop at the corner. People walked past. Some glanced their way, but most didn't. Claire looked around and saw the bench for what it had become. It wasn't just a place to sit. It was where two people had crossed paths quietly, where one small act had met one quiet need, where no one had asked for anything, but something had been given anyway. Jessie looked better than they had the week before. Not by a lot, but enough to notice. Their shoulders weren't as tense. Their voice was a little stronger when they finally spoke. "I've got a meeting at the shelter later. For housing." Claire nodded. "That's good." Jessie shrugged. "We'll see. But, yeah, I'm trying." Claire didn't offer advice, didn't say, "You've got this," just said, "I'll be here." Jessie nodded. "I know." The next day, the lunch was still there. Jessie took it. They didn't always stay and talk. Some mornings they just waved, grabbed the bag, and walked off. Other days, they sat together quietly, splitting the fruit or trading stories in pieces. Claire never asked too much. Jessie never shared more than they wanted to. But it was enough. Eventually, the cold gave way to spring. The trees started to bloom. The city felt less gray. Jessie showed up with cleaner clothes, newer shoes. One day, they showed her a key to a room they were moving into. She smiled and said, "You still get a lunch." They laughed. "I was hoping you'd say that." By then, she didn't just pack the extra lunch out of habit. She packed it knowing who it was for, knowing it still mattered. Not because Jessie had nothing, but because Jessie remembered what it felt like to have nothing, and still needed to feel seen. Some mornings Jessie didn't show up. That was okay. The lunch still went on the bench, and most days it was still gone by noon. Claire never found out if someone else started taking it. She didn't need to, because that bench wasn't just a drop-off spot anymore. It was a place where someone had once trusted that the world still had kindness in it, and she had been part of that, quietly, steadily, one lunch at a time. Thank you for watching. If you enjoy meaningful stories like this, we'd love to have you as a subscriber.